Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this question for a moment. How many years have you spent feeling everything, and I mean everything, that the people around you feel? How many times have you walked into a room and, before anyone said a single word, you already knew who was hurting, who was angry, who was pretending to be fine? How many nights have you gone to bed exhausted, not from the work you did, but from the weight you carried for other people all day long? If that sounds familiar to you, then I need you to know something right now. At the very start of our time together, what you have been living with your entire life, that deep, almost painful sensitivity to the world around you, that is not your weakness, that is not your curse, and it was never something that needed to be fixed or apologized for. What you have been carrying is a gift, but like many powerful things, it came without a manual, and that is what we are going to talk about today. I have spent my life studying the human mind, the human soul, and the deep, invisible forces that shape who we become. I have sat with people from all walks of life, in all kinds of pain, and I have seen something again and again that took me many years to fully understand. The people who feel the most deeply are often the ones who suffer the most silently, not because the world is cruel to them, though sometimes it is, but because nobody ever taught them what to do with what they feel. You were taught to be kind. You were taught to help. You were taught to listen, to give, to hold space for others. And you did all of that beautifully, you still do. But somewhere along the way, probably without anyone meaning any harm, you were not taught how to protect your own heart in the process. You were not taught that it is okay to put yourself down before you pour everything you have into someone else. You were not taught that your feelings deserve a home too, not just the feelings of everyone you love. And so many of you sitting with me today, learned something very early in life. You learned to make yourself smaller so that others could feel bigger. You learned to swallow your own pain so you would have more room to hold someone else's. You learned that being needed felt safer than being loved. And over time, that became your normal. That became who you thought you were. But I want to gently, lovingly, with great care and great respect, push back against that story today. Because that is not who you are. That is what happened to you. And there is a very important difference between the two. When I talk about what we carry from our past, I am talking about the parts of ourselves that were shaped by our experiences, the moments that taught us it was safer to give than to receive, safer to understand than to be understood, safer to be strong for others than to fall apart and be held ourselves. These patterns do not make you broken. They made perfect sense at the time. They were your way of surviving. But survival and living are two very different things. Many of you are in your 50s or 60s now. You have raised children. You have buried parents. You have stood at the edges of other people's storms and held the umbrella steady while the rain soaked through your own coat. You have given decades of quiet, faithful, unsung emotional labor to your families, your friends, your communities. And you are tired, not just physically tired, tired in a place that sleep does not reach. I see that. I honor that. And I am not here to tell you that you did it wrong, because you did not. You did the best you could with what you knew. You loved with everything you had. But I am here today to tell you something that I believe with my whole heart. Something that has come from a lifetime of studying what it means to be truly, deeply human. And it is this. The second half of your life does not have to look like the first half. You are not done. You are not fading. You are not too old to change, or too set in your ways to grow, or too far gone to heal. In fact, if I am being completely honest with you, I believe that the years you are standing in right now, these years, are some of the most powerful years of your entire journey. Not because life is easier now. Sometimes it is harder. But because you have something now that you did not have at 30 or 40. You have lived enough to know what matters. You have survived enough to know what you are made of. And if someone has finally told you, or if something deep in your chest is finally whispering it to you, that you deserve to heal, that you deserve to come home to yourself, then you are standing at the most important doorway of your life. And here is what I want you to understand about that doorway, about what is waiting on the other side of it, about what healing actually does to a person like you. Because I think there is a picture in your mind of what a healed empath looks like. And I think that picture might be too small. Most people imagine that healing simply means you stop hurting so much, that you finally put up some walls, that you learn to say no without guilt, that you stop absorbing everyone else's pain like a sponge. And yes, all of those things are part of it. All of those things are real and good and necessary. But they are not the whole picture. What actually happens when someone like you, someone who has felt deeply their whole life, goes through genuine, honest, hard-won healing is something far more remarkable than simply feeling less pain. What happens is a kind of becoming, a transformation that is quiet on the outside, but absolutely profound on the inside. And to understand what that transformation really looks like, we have to start at the very beginning. We have to go back and look honestly at something that most sensitive people have never fully understood about themselves. We have to look honestly at what it actually means to be an empath in the first place. Now, I know that word gets used a lot these days. You see it on social media. You see it on coffee mugs and bumper stickers. And sometimes when a word gets used too much, it starts to lose its meaning. It starts to feel like a label instead of a lived experience. So I do not want to use it as a label today. I want to use it as a description. A real, honest description of something very specific that happens inside certain people. An empath is not simply someone who is kind. There are many kind people in the world who do not carry what you carry. An empath is not just someone who cries at movies or feels sad when a friend is going through something hard. That is normal human compassion, and it is beautiful, but it is not quite the same thing. What makes you different, and I say different not to separate you, but to help you see yourself more clearly, is that you do not just notice what other people feel. You absorb it. You take it in. It moves through the walls of your chest like the walls were never there to begin with. Someone walks into your house upset, and before they say a single word, your whole body shifts. Your stomach tightens. Your energy changes. You feel it before you understand it. And then, almost automatically, you start adjusting yourself to meet it. That is not a choice you make. That is just how you are wired. And here is the thing that most people never stop to think about, the thing that I want you to really hold in your hands for a moment. That ability, that extraordinary sensitivity, that capacity to feel what others feel as if it were happening inside your own body, that did not come from nowhere. For most of you, it was not something you were simply born with, and that was that. It developed, it grew. It was shaped by your earliest experiences, by the environment you grew up in, by what you needed to learn in order to feel safe. Many of you grew up in homes where the emotional temperature could change very quickly, where you learned, very young, to read the room, where you became an expert at sensing when a parent was close to the edge, or when the silence meant something was wrong, or when you needed to make yourself useful before things got hard. You became so good at reading other people that it became second nature. It became survival, and the gift that came out of that, because a gift did come out of it, even though it was born in a hard place. The gift was this extraordinary ability to understand people, to feel them, to know them in a way that most people never get to know another human being. People have always felt safe with you. They have always been drawn to you. They tell you things they have never told anyone else. They feel seen when they are around you. And that is not a small thing. That is one of the most precious things one human being can offer another. But here is what nobody told you. Here is the part that got left out. When you learned to feel everything, you also learned, without meaning to trust everything you felt as if it were your own. You stopped being able to tell the difference between what was yours and what belonged to someone else. You carried other people's grief as if you were the one grieving. You carried other people's anxiety as if you were the one in danger. You carried other people's shame, their anger, their disappointment, their loneliness, and you held all of it inside your body as if it had your name written on it. And that is an enormous amount of weight for one person to carry through a lifetime. Think about it this way. Imagine you are a sponge, a beautiful, generous, wide-open sponge, and every single day people come to you and they are wet. They are soaked through with their pain, their worry, their need, and you absorb it, you take it in, because that is what you do, that is who you are. And for a while you can still breathe, you can still function. But eventually, after years and years and years of absorbing without ever being wrung out, without ever being rinsed clean and set in the sun to dry, you become so saturated that you cannot take in anything new. You cannot even feel yourself anymore underneath all of it. That is what emotional exhaustion really is, for someone like you. It is not laziness. It is not weakness. It is not ingratitude. It is a sponge that has never been taught how to release what it holds. And this is where I want to slow down, because what I am about to say is something I need you to really hear. The problem was never that you felt too much. The problem was that you were never given permission to feel for yourself. You were always feeling toward someone, always feeling for someone, always feeling because of someone. But your own inner life, your own needs, your own grief, your own longing, your own joy, those things were often pushed to the back of the room, quietly, politely, without drama, but pushed back nonetheless. And over time, you may have started to believe that your feelings only mattered when they were in service of someone else. That your emotions were only useful as a tool for understanding others, not as a language that your own soul was trying to speak to you. That belief, that quiet, deeply buried belief, is one of the most painful things an empath carries, and it is one of the first things that genuine healing asks you to let go of. Because here is the truth, your feelings are not a radar system for other people's pain. Yes, they can be that. Yes, they function that way. But that is not their only purpose. Your feelings are also the voice of your own soul. They are how you know what you need. They are how you know when something is wrong for you. They are how you find your own way through the world, not just how you help other people find theirs. And when a person who has spent decades putting that voice on hold finally begins to listen to it, something starts to happen inside them. Something quiet at first. Something that might even feel a little strange, a little uncomfortable, like walking back into a room you have not been in for a very long time. But it is not strange. It is not something to be afraid of. It is the beginning of coming home to yourself. And I want to tell you what that homecoming actually looks like, because I think you may be imagining it as something gentle and soft and simple, like finally getting some rest after a long day. And there is rest in it, yes. There is relief. There is a kind of quiet that you have not felt in years. But it is also something more than that. It is something stronger, something that will surprise you. Because what happens to an empath when they begin to truly heal is not that they become less. It is not that they close off or harden or stop caring. It is not that the sensitivity goes away. What happens is something that I have watched unfold in people many times over, and it never stops moving me when I see it. They begin to become something the world genuinely needs. Something rare and powerful and steady. Something that cannot be fully explained until you have seen it. Until you have felt it in another person, or until you begin to feel it stirring inside yourself. And to understand what that something is, we need to talk about the difference between a wound and a scar. Because those two things look similar from the outside, but inside they are worlds apart. A wound is still open. A wound still bleeds when it is touched. A wound still shapes every decision you make, every relationship you enter, every room you walk into, often without even knowing it is there. But a scar is different. A scar is what a wound becomes when it has been tended to with honesty and patience and time. A scar does not bleed anymore. A scar does not run the show from the shadows. A scar is simply proof that something happened to you, and that you survived it, and that your body, your soul, your spirit was strong enough to heal around it. And here is what I have learned about people who carry healed scars instead of open wounds. They do not become careful. They do not become distant. They do not become the kind of person who keeps everyone at arm's length just to protect themselves. They become something far more powerful than that. They become grounded. And grounded is a word I want you to sit with, because I think it is one of the most important words in this entire conversation. What it means to be grounded is not what most people think it means. It does not mean you are rigid. It does not mean you are unmovable. It does not mean you stop feeling. A tree that is deeply rooted still bends in the wind. It still moves. It still responds to the storm. But it does not get pulled out of the earth. It does not lose itself in the weather. It bends and then it comes back. It moves and then it returns to center. That is what a healed empath begins to do. That is the first and most foundational change that happens when someone like you starts to truly heal. You do not stop feeling the wind. You grow roots deep enough that the wind cannot take you with it anymore. And those roots, the way they grow, the way they deepen, the way they change everything about how you move through the world and how you love and how you give and how you finally receive. Those roots do not grow in silence. They do not grow in isolation. They do not grow simply because one day you decided to feel better. They grow through something that is uncomfortable and necessary and, I believe, deeply sacred. They grow through truth, not the kind of truth that you announce to the world, not the kind of truth that you post somewhere or perform for an audience. The quiet kind, the private kind, the kind that happens in the early morning before anyone else is awake, when it is just you and the mirror and the still, small voice inside you that has been trying to get your attention for years. That voice. I want to talk about that voice for a moment. You know the one I mean. You have felt it. Maybe you have heard it at the edge of sleep, or in the middle of a conversation when something felt wrong, but you smiled anyway. Maybe you felt it when you said yes to something and your whole body quietly said no. Maybe you have felt it for a long time, that gentle, persistent pull, like a hand on your sleeve, like something just below the surface of your busy life that keeps asking to be heard. That is not anxiety. That is not weakness. That is your soul. And your soul has been extraordinarily patient with you. But I want to say this with love. With all the warmth and seriousness I have in me, patience has a season. And the season you are in right now, these years, this particular stretch of your life, this is not a time for more waiting. This is not a time to say, maybe next year I will deal with this. Maybe when things calm down. Maybe when the grandchildren are older. Maybe when I have more energy. Because here is what I have learned, and what I have watched happen in more lives than I can count. The people who keep waiting for the right moment to come home to themselves often look up one day and realize that many of their best years were spent carrying what they should have put down decades ago. And that realization is painful. Not because the years were wasted, they were not. You were loving people and that is never wasted. But painful because of what could have been added to that love if you had been whole while you gave it. Imagine loving someone from a full heart instead of a depleted one. Imagine being present with your children, your grandchildren, your dearest friends, not just physically present, but truly there, all of you there. Not the tired, stretched, thin, quietly overwhelmed version of you, but the real you, the rooted you, the you that has done the work and come through the other side of it. That is not a fantasy, that is available to you, right now, at this exact point in your life, but it requires something, and I will not soften this, because I care about you too much to be dishonest. It requires you to stop running from your own interior life. It requires you to stop being more comfortable with everyone else's pain than with your own. It requires you to sit down, in whatever way that means for you, whether it is prayer, whether it is quiet reflection, whether it is finally talking to someone you trust, and to look honestly at what you have been carrying and ask yourself with real sincerity, does this belong to me? And if it does not, can I finally, gently, with forgiveness and without guilt, set it down? Because there is something waiting on the other side of that honesty. Something that I believe with my whole heart is not just psychological. It is not just emotional. It is spiritual. It is the kind of deep inner renewal that comes when a person finally stops hiding from themselves and turns, with whatever courage they have left, toward the light. And I use that word light carefully and deliberately, because I have seen what happens in a person when they stop pretending, when they stop performing, when they finally crack open the door they have kept closed for so long and let something real and warm and healing come in. Something comes in. Something does come in. Call it grace. Call it truth. Call it the love of God moving into the spaces you finally made room for. Whatever language feels right to you, whatever name you give it, the experience itself is the same. It is the feeling of being known, truly known. Not the version of you that holds everything together for everyone else, but the real you, the tired you, the hopeful you, the you that still, after everything, believes that something better is possible. And that belief, that stubborn, beautiful, quietly burning belief that something better is possible, that is not naivety. That is not wishful thinking. In a person your age, with your history, with everything you have been through and survived and carried and given, that belief is one of the bravest things in the world. Hold on to it, because what I am about to share with you next is going to show you exactly what becomes possible when that belief meets real, honest, grounded healing. When the empath who has spent a lifetime feeling everything for everyone finally turns that same extraordinary sensitivity inward, finally uses that gift not just to understand others, but to understand themselves. What happens then is not what you might expect. It is not quiet. It is not small. It is not simply a matter of feeling a little better and getting a little more sleep. What happens then is something that changes not just you, but everyone around you. But before we get there, I need to stop for a moment. I need to set aside everything else and just talk to you. Not as a speaker to an audience, not as someone who has studied the mind for decades, just as one human being to another, heart to heart, because there is something sitting in this room right now, something I can feel, and I do not want to walk past it. Some of you are tired in a way that goes deeper than exhaustion. Some of you have been strong for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to lean on anything. Some of you are sitting here today with old pain that never got a proper name. Pain from relationships that took more than they gave. Pain from years of showing up for people who never quite showed up for you. Pain from choices you made, or choices that were made for you, that you have never fully forgiven, not in others, and not, if you are honest, in yourself. That last part. That is the one I want to stay with, because in all my years of sitting with people, in all my years of listening to the human heart, I have found that the wound that goes the deepest, the one that does the most quiet damage over the longest stretch of time, is not what someone else did to you. It is what you have never been able to forgive yourself for. Maybe it was a decision you made when you were younger and did not know better. Maybe it was something you said, or did not say, to someone you loved. Maybe it was a season of your life that you are not proud of. Maybe it is something smaller than all of that, something that no one else even remembers, but that you have carried like a stone in your shoe for 20, 30, 40 years. And all this time you have kept giving. You have kept loving. You have kept showing up for everyone around you, but underneath all of that goodness, underneath all of that generosity, there has been this quiet voice. This low, persistent, exhausting voice that whispers, yes, but you know what you did. Yes, but you know who you really are. Yes, but you do not deserve the peace you are looking for. I want to speak directly to that voice today. And I want to say, with everything in me, that voice is lying to you. That voice is not the voice of truth. It is not the voice of God. It is the voice of an old wound that never healed properly. And it has had far too much power over your life for far too long. Because here is what I know about God, and I say this not as a theologian, not with complicated language, but as someone who has watched the human soul long enough to know what it needs. God does not keep a record of the forgiven. When something is released, when it is truly brought into the light and let go, it does not sit somewhere waiting to be used against you. It is gone. It is covered. It is finished. But you have to let it go. And that is the hardest part, is it not? Not believing that God can forgive you. Most of you believe that in your mind. The hard part is letting yourself receive it, actually opening your hands, actually putting down the weight, actually saying, I was wrong and I am sorry, and I am going to stop punishing myself for something that has already been forgiven. That is repentance, real repentance. Not the kind that beats itself bloody and keeps bringing the same thing back to the altar every 6 months. Real repentance is the kind that trusts, that says, I believe you. I believe this is done. I am going to walk forward now, not because I deserve to, but because I was loved anyway. And that trust, that daily, ordinary, humble trust in a love that does not waver even when you do, that is not weakness. That is the strongest thing a human being can do. I know some of you have been hurt by people who were supposed to represent that love and did not. I know some of you have sat in pews and felt judged instead of held. I know some of you have prayed prayers that felt like they hit the ceiling and came right back down. I know that faith is not always easy, and I am not standing here pretending it is. But I am asking you, gently and urgently at the same time, do not let someone else's failure to love you well become the reason you keep yourself from the love that has been reaching for you this entire time. Do not let the wounds that people gave you in God's name convince you that God himself has turned away from you. Because he has not. He has not moved. He has been here, in the quiet, in the early mornings, in the moments when you felt most alone. He has been closer than your own breath. And healing, real healing, the kind that transforms an empath from someone who is endlessly depleted into someone who is deeply powerful. That healing does not happen fully until we let him into the rooms we have kept locked. The rooms with the old shame in them. The rooms with the grief we never processed. The rooms with the anger we were too polite to admit we felt. He is not afraid of those rooms. He is not waiting at the door with disappointment on his face. He is waiting with something that looks a great deal more like patience and tenderness, and a kind of welcome that you have not let yourself feel in a very long time. So let him in. That is not a complicated instruction. You do not need a degree to do it. You do not need the right words or the perfect prayer or a special moment on a Sunday morning. You just need one honest breath, one real moment where you stop performing and stop pretending and just say, here I am, all of me, the tired parts and the broken parts and the parts I am ashamed of. Here I am. That is enough. That has always been enough. And I want you to hear this next part as if I am sitting right across from you, looking you in the eyes, speaking only to you. Because in this moment I am. You have spent enough time making yourself small. You have spent enough years disappearing into other people's needs while your own soul quietly waited in the hallway. You have given enough, worried enough, apologized enough for simply being a person who feels deeply in a world that did not always know what to do with that. It is time now. It is time to receive. Not just from God, though start there, but from life itself, from the people who genuinely love you, from the quiet moments that are trying to restore you if you will only let them, from your own heart, which has been knocking softly for years, asking to finally be heard. You are not too old for this. You are not too damaged. You are not too far behind. Some of the most profound transformations I have ever witnessed happened in people who were exactly where you are right now, people who thought their best years were behind them and discovered, to their own astonishment, that the most meaningful chapter was just beginning. That is what I believe about you. Not because I am required to say it, but because I have seen what happens when a person like you, a person who has loved so deeply for so long, finally turns that love inward and upward. The world around them changes. The people they love feel it. Something shifts that cannot be explained, but can absolutely be felt. You were never just here to absorb the pain of others. You were here to show the world what it looks like when a human being chooses, after everything, to heal, to grow, to stand rooted and open at the same time. That is your gift, that is your calling, and it is not too late. It has never been too late. Now go and begin.